It's the India #1 and world #5 on your screen. Arjun Erigaisi is taking on Arvind Chithambaram here. And I love this clash. I love this matchup because both of them are extremely creative players, go wild at their opponents, and now they're facing off against each other. I believe in the recently held Tata Steel Chess India, Arvind managed to draw one game against Arjun in rapid and then lost both the games in blitz. While there was one big win that Arvind had scored at the Chennai Grandmasters in 2024, where Arvind had won the tournament. Here it's all now fresh game. Here you can see Arjun calmly trying to get into the zone. He plays the Sicilian. Wow. E4, C5. This is going to be so exciting because Arvind and Arjun can be capable of creating magic on the board if they go all in. Let's see if that happens today. Knight comes out to F3. Pawn to E6 played by Arjun. So he's maybe going for the Sicilian Khan or the Sicilian Taimano variation. Pawn to D4. Open Sicilian is on the board. Pawn takes pawn taken. And now knight takes pawn here by Arvind. And you have knight to c6. We have the Sicilian Taimano on the board. Now the main move by a big margin is knight to c3 here. That's how they play. But Arvind goes for knight b5. Second most popular move, aiming at the slightly weakened dark squares. And knight f6 played by Arjun. Generally you play d6 so that you don't allow knight d6 check. But he goes knight f6. He's putting pressure on the e4 pawn. And bishop f4 played here by Arvind. He's threatening a check on c7. So no time to win this pawn. Knight c7 wins the day for white. So he goes e5. Blocks the bishop. And the bishop moves one step ahead, pinning the knight. Now d6 is a natural move here. But he goes bishop c5. And what needs to be understood here is that there's pressure on f2. If you go knight d6 check, I can take and play knight e4 and black is better. So I need to defend my e4 pawn. So he does go knight c3. Now, there are threats of the knight jumping into d5. By the way, this is a possible line. There is a game Murzin versus Chigaev, which has gone absolutely crazy here with bishop f2. Actually, you start with check and all these lines, maybe I'll explain it later in the game. But Arvind simply takes on f6. And if gf6, then knight d5 and white is better. So queen takes f6, threatening a mate in one here on f2. So goes knight c7 check. Now this check is very interesting because after king d8, you don't have the time to pick up this knight on c7 because there's you don't have time to pick up the rook here because there's a mate on f2. So f3 played. But you can't pick up the knight as well because there's knight d5 check. So you have to live with this position. And this is really dangerous what Arjun has opted for. Essentially, what Arjun is saying here is that, hey, I am feeling h5 played. By the way, he's preparing queen h6 to trade queens. That your dark squares are so weak that I'm ready to even part with my castling rights. Now knight d5 played by Arvind. He attacks the queen. Queen h6 played, offering a trade of queens. If you trade queens, black is completely fine. So f4 makes so much sense. E takes f4. Now remember, one of the things that's extremely weak is the d6 pawn and the king on d8. So Arvind simply castles here. Very interesting. f3 is possible now to trade queens. gf and queen d2. Maybe white is slightly better, but Arjun is like, why should I do that? I'll go bishop d4. Maybe I'll put my bishop on e5 where it is much more solidly positioned. Okay. Arvind is like, fine, go for it, Arjun. By the way, remember that bishop e3 is a bad move because I take on d6 here. The rook is now on d1. So you have to go back to e5. Bishop comes back to e5. I think only a player like Arjun can feel comfortable with such a position, with the king on d8. Knight takes f4 taken by Arvind. Maybe he could have played king b1 with this pawn, but knight f4 makes sense. Bishop goes to g4, attacking the rook. You can play bishop e2 to trade, but then the queens would get traded. So rook e1 played, defending the pawn. And now maybe just go back and attack, yes, the knight. So one of the threats could be to take on d5 and then trade the queens when the position would be roughly even. I think g3 makes a lot of sense. So that if you take here, I don't have to worry about this. Now ed5 and white is completely better. f4 is no longer hanging. So good move there. And look at Arjun. He's creating play here. He wants to take on g3 and pick up the rook. Rook g1 by Arvind. Arvind essentially believing that if he manages to ride the storm that Arjun has right now, he'll have a better position. Bishop d4 attacks the rook here on g1. But now rook g2. And yes, he plays it rook to g2. And you can see that some of the squares have been taken away from the rook. If you take another square away with h3 here, then he must go to e2 and then bishop g4 and the white rook is trapped. Now, how good is it for black, this entire variation, is the question. Arjun goes for it. He wants the material. But I think Arvind has assessed it better than Arjun. Rook e2 played. And now bishop g4, you must do it. Otherwise, why do you play h3, right? Bishop g4. For losing the exchange, you have two amazing knights. He goes rook e3. He gets this bishop. Oh, that's even smarter. Because this is the key bishop, I feel, for black. He goes g5. Doesn't even care about taking the material. But why not knight e2 now? You will see that lot of squares have been weakened. f5, f6. He's attacking the bishop now. Arjun is going insanely crazy here. Bishop takes e3. And now a very important move, knight takes. Yes, he takes it. And now you will see the knight is angling here and at the bishop. So if you take here, I'll take with the bishop. Knight is coming to f5, bishop to g4. White is clearly better. bd7 played. And we have knight to d4. Oh, he goes knight c3. I was wondering if knight d4 makes sense because then you go this way. But knight c3 also fine. g4. Arjun tries to activate the queen. I think you don't have to rush here as white. Just play it calmly. Bishop e2, good move. King b1, maybe rook f1, rook d1, knight jumps here, knight can be on f4, other knight goes to d5. There are many possibilities. He goes rook e8. Pressure on e4, maybe wants to do f5 business. Rook f1, stopping it perhaps in its tracks, but Arjun, I guess, will anyway pursue that idea. Yes, he plays f5. And the point is, if knight f5, you want to trade queens and hope this position is good for you. But Arvind is like, I'm okay. Take the pawn, Arjun, if you want. fe4, and now maybe be okay with these extra pawns for black. Because you have complete control in the position here. g4 is weak. Knight is well positioned. But I think Arvind takes the pawn. He's tempted, which gives some breathing space to the black pieces. Rook f8, nice move by Arjun. In chaos, Arjun is able to understand what is the best way to move forward. It's crazy. Although his position is bad, knight to g4. Now this drops the advantage. A better way to play was take and play knight d5 when white is seriously pressing here in spite of being an exchange down because the rook is not in the game. Knight g4 does attack the queen. But after bishop takes g4, I think the position is now getting simplified. You can't play, I mean, if you play bishop g4, I have rook takes f4, and this position, I think black is unraveling with the rook coming out. So rook g4 played. Ooh, and actually it's Arjun now who's better. Maybe he should have taken rook f8, queen f8 and bg4, but now rook g4 and take the queen, and he takes it. And if you take stock of the position now, by the way, Arvind had only 3 minutes left to make 8 moves to reach move 40. Black has exchange up, but white has an extra pawn. That's the material count. King c7. I guess you want to give rook g7 check, but king can go to b6. And what is one very important thing that you want to avoid? Rook f2 is a dangerous move. He goes rook e8. He activates the rook. I mean, rook f2 was also quite dangerous in this sense, but check, and maybe he didn't like it. So check. King goes back to b8. Now both the rooks are in the game. Black is happy. Rook f4 played. Okay, maybe just trade it. He doesn't. He keeps the rooks on the board. 36 moves done. Pawn to c4 played by Arvind. Can Arjun find a way to attack the h2 pawn? Because if he manages to get to the h2 pawn, he would be really better. Rook e5, bishop d3. Just improving the position of the bishop. Rook g5. Ooh, big threat now. Rook takes pawn, pawn takes h2, h1. Maybe that's the threat. I don't know. He goes knight f6. Knight to f6, but now knight e5, jumping in. I think that's a great idea here. Knight e5, attacking the bishop, also putting pressure on c4. Maybe even eyeing the g4 square later. Knight goes back to e4, attacking the rook on g5. And he takes on d3. Maybe rook g4 is what would have given black a great position. Knight d3, king d3. And rook to a5. Putting pressure here on the a2 pawn. And he must come back knight c3, because if he goes a3, d5, and black is very happy. Knight c3 played. Is there a way for the black pieces to enter in? He goes rook e5. Maybe one idea is rook e1, rook g1, rook g2. This could be one idea. King d2 played. And a6. Well, Arjun is better here for sure, but it's not so easy to break in. That's the problem. He goes a4. Maybe some patience, yeah, like king a7, a5, king b6, king c5. Slowly move in. a5 played. And b3. He plays b3 on the board. And king comes up to a7. Now the king wants to come up here. Rook to f7 played. And maybe now, I'm not sure how to take advantage of this, but the best move is rook e8. Maybe just to trade, yeah, the rooks. Rook f8 and trade a pair of rooks. I think Arjun is going for it and finds it. Rook e8 on the board. And this is already a huge advantage for Arjun now. He's gotten a decisive edge. It's difficult to understand this position, I must say. Attacking a5, and the best move now is to actually sack it. Rook takes a5, king b8, king e2, stopping here, rook f7, double check, and basically you are entering in this position and winning here, because rook takes h3 and rook d8 and you win material. So king a6 played by Arjun was not the best move. I mean, you had to give up this pawn and try to use your rooks and this h2 pawn. Knight d5 played now, threatening a check. Rook e4. Maybe here rook f8, but there is g4 now, and white is fine. So maybe the other rook was better, but he goes rook e4. Rook f6. I think at this point both the players are just trying to do their best, find the best possibilities. Rook takes d6. Can we go like rook here, but then just knight f4 blocks it, unable to make progress here. Maybe rook f6 also could block. By the way, he goes rook g4. And Arjun's threat is simple. He wants to take, and make a queen. But I think what you can do is white is rook f6. And if he takes, you take. And if he plays h2, you come back. h1, you take it. Yes, take. H takes g3. h2. Rook f1. h1 queen. Rook takes h1. Rook takes h1. h1 queen. And this position is actually a drawn position, because white has 2 extra pawns. He may even lose with this 1 g pawn and stay with 3 versus 2, and that's a drawn endgame with a knight versus rook. Arjun goes after the g pawn. I believe Arvind has no interest in saving that pawn. c5 played. Rook takes. King c4. And now we're just going in fast motion, because they made several moves here, but the result is never in doubt. Rook takes b3, knight c8. King b4. King c8. Knight goes back. King c7. It's an instructive endgame there that, you know, a knight and 2 pawns are good enough against a rook. And Arjun is completely right in trying here. But now with the final set of pawns exchanged, he gives up the rook and it's a draw. What a game this was by both of them. I think a full-fledged fight with great opening, impressive middle game. And I think Arjun is saying something like, you know, uh, shouldn't have taken there on, like, there were so many improvements for both sides in this game. A game that signifies two creative geniuses, two fighters. Arvind and Arjun, thank you for entertaining us with this excellent game. They went to analyze for quite some time, but I'm pretty sure that this game can be looked at in great depth. Exchange down position for Arvind, but was still better, shows the richness of chess. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. Well, I promised to show you the opening, so here it is. So the thing is, takes, knight c6, knight b5, knight f6, bishop f4, e5, bishop g5. And now if you play the move d6, it's quite possible that it can transpose back into the Sveshnikov with knight c3, a6, knight a3, b5. But it's also possible that white doesn't go for it and plays bishop f6, takes, and knight d2 line. So that's the reason why Arjun goes bishop c5. And now knight c3, defending this pawn. So clearly there is this tactic now. So for example, d6 played, bishop f6. If you play the move knight d5, which is an interesting move that was played by Murzin against Chigayev, then knight e4, knight c7, king f8, bishop d8, takes, king e2, check, king d3. Now a very important move, check, king c4 even, bishop d1, and now knight takes a8. And now in the game, there was a blunder when bishop, I think, went back to g4, but bishop c2 and the equality is maintained. This is worth studying, this line. Bishop f6, you can't take gf6 because knight d5 and white is better here. So you have to take with the queen attacking here, and from this point onwards the game becomes quite whatever was explained in the video. But yes, this theory here related to d6, bishop f6, and I mean knight d5, you can't take bishop f2. This is very important to note, because take, knight e4, king g1, queen g5 and queen e1 attacking here, stopping queen e3 ideas, threatening a check, is actually very good. Because if you are greedy and you do this thing here, although the knight controls this, this is such an amazing position that black is actually doing fine here after take and bishop e6 because the square is weak. So h4, queen g3, and yeah, you can't get all your pieces into the game. So I hope you can understand the complexity of this opening, and that you study it carefully. Maybe it will help you win some points from both colors.